All right, welcome back to Pac West Bigfoot. This is David, and before we get started on our latest Bigfoot encounter story here, wanted to give a shout out to you for listening and just being here. I really do greatly appreciate all of you for being here and listening in, being a part of the community. Just so you know, mypacwestbigfoot.com is an awesome little place where you can get some Pac West Bigfoot shirts and whatnot. And that's all I have for the advertisement part. Here's the deal. Not only is the winner in August going to get an awesome little Sasquatch coffee sticker, but also I'm going to be giving away this month t-shirt, a member's t-shirt from the Southern California Sasquatch organization, plus some of the best Bigfoot artwork I've ever seen, which is on some cards, little greeting type cards, created by Robin Hyatt, and I'll be sending out a link in the email to you guys so you can check out some of her Bigfoot artwork. So here's the deal. If you are not subscribed, go over to pacwestbigfoot.com. You can subscribe, get on, and get a chance to win free stuff every single month. Okay? Awesome. Well, you know what? I'm going to clear my throat anyways, for some of you. I'm actually going to clear my throat from time to time. This is a nice, long, almost 3,000 word encounter story here. And not to mention, I do want to say this real quick. For those of you who think that triple digits in the Pacific Northwest are a rarity, they're not as rare as you think. But I do want you guys to be careful and be safe out there, okay? All right. God bless you guys. Let's get started on this. Clear my throat. A little bit of water, and let's get to Houskeeper watches as Bigfoot try to enter cabin while she's cleaning it. My name is Alma, and yes, I am a bit nervous about sharing my story, but as incredible as it sounds, it happened, and today I do not work there. Seriously, I watched as a Bigfoot tried to enter a cabin I was cleaning one evening in Northern California. Near the foothills into the Sierra Nevada mountain range, in particular, the Plumas National Forest, I worked for a small conglomerate of owners of a particular collection of high-end cabins that they rent out as vacation homes. They are spread out near the lake below Bald Mountain, and here is my experience and why I decided to quit. Bigfoot tried to enter the cabin. I love my simple life and career. I am a house cleaner and do some light maintenance as well for high-end vacation rentals in Northern California. Even today, I enjoy the same career, only in a different location, however, in Oregon, outside of Brookings. But my last job or location took me to the mountains or foothills of the Sierra Nevada range of the California side of the Plumas National Forest. There I worked for a group of individuals keeping up, maintaining, and cleaning their high-end villas and cabins near a large, well-known lake. In exchange, I was given a small cabin of my own, one of the properties, plus my going rate for cleaning and basic management. So, stipend plus housing, it was a great living, and great life for a soon-to-be 30-something, if you ask me. However, I was never as frightened in my life as I was one early evening, when some guests unexpectedly packed up and left with only a short notice, and the request of a refund for the remaining 2 nights they would not be there. And I found myself watching a large Bigfoot enter a cabin, and for a moment I thought I was going to die. I did not have any incidents before this, just so you know, and I had been up there for nearly a year up until that day. I never heard or seen anything out of the ordinary. Crying wolf. It was a new week, and 3 of the cabins, well, homes as far as I was concerned, were to be filled by 3 p.m. for the next 5 days. The first 2 guests, or reservations of 3 actually, showed up rather early. About 2 hours earlier, I remember. It being a Monday and all, well, I could not blame them for wanting to get away from it all sooner. I personally love what I do. I love people, don't get me wrong, but I do not like a million of them all crammed up into 100 square city blocks, if you know what I mean. working on some resort out of the way of the busy world. Well, like I said, I love it. The younger couple, they were to stay in the lakeside cabin, a small but over-the-top, fully stocked and beautiful posh cabin with 2 bedrooms. And yes, to tell you the truth, mostly the wealthy stay here. I had already seen 2 Hollywood elites there right before this encounter. I check people in, make sure they have everything as requested, and then let them be and enjoy their escape from their own little worlds, unless they need me. It was not even 4 hours later that I was called and notified that someone was throwing rocks at the smaller lakeside cabin. I am not security, but with the police station, the nearest one that is, literally almost an hour away, well, I have to be armed, and I did play cop a little bit. I headed over to the cabin, this time taking my little Jeep. It was as I approached the cabin that I saw or met the guests about 20 or so yards away from it, on the side of the long dirt driveway, a private driveway at that. I stopped, hopped out I remember, and that is when the irritated guests started in and on me about rocks being thrown. I could not find the rocks themselves. We were in the woods with rocks of all sizes everywhere. But they did show me where they heard them hit. And there were a couple, 2 or 3 stones that looked a little out of place, I supposed, but we could not be sure. The only thing we knew was that someone was throwing rocks at the cabin. It was the back side of the cabin where the bedrooms were, and behind the wall was the driveway, and across from it, well, forest. Thick old forest. The lake itself could not be seen from the cabin, however. It was literally within 100 yards or so of it to the north. Like I said, these are a small collection of high-end cabins that cannot be seen unless you walk right up on them or fly over them. Apparently, however, someone or some persons have come up on them and were now bugging the guests. I decided to take a walk around the property near the area we think the rocks came from. I even ventured out into the thick of the trees and tall brush. Not a smart plan with rattlesnakes out and about, but you do what you need to do when it comes to your job, especially when you love what you do like me. I did not hear or see a thing. No boot or shoe prints, no sound at all, and the rocks stopped even before I got there. After a good look around, I apologized for any inconvenience and went back to my little cabin. It was not an hour later that they called again about the same problem. They were sitting on the front porch and heard as 2 more rocks hit the backside of the cabin. They were now irritated. Once again, I went back, looked around, offered apologies that were taken lightly by 2 yuppies and left. It was all quiet after that, at least until the next morning. Smacking in heels. I am a light sleeper, so sleeping in past 7 or 8 a.m. is a blessing for me. Before this job, I was in sales and marketing and was in traffic jams and traffic in general at least 2 hours a day, and that was before and after I got off work. I hated it. But now I do what I love. However, that next morning, I was awakened by a phone buzzing, and when I answered I was almost verbally abused. I got them settled down and to talk to me a little more calmly and rationally. They said that a couple people were trying to break in less than 30 minutes ago, and that earlier in the morning they were woken by a smack on the side of the cabin. Got dressed, brushed my teeth, and drove quickly over to the cabin. I did a walk around again, and this time I noticed some footprints. Well, heel prints more like it. It was hard ground there, and leaving much of any toe impressions would be difficult for anything, including what I would come to know as Bigfoot, who was bothering these 2 people. I looked around some more in the early light. It seemed as though the heel prints stayed mostly on the back side of the cabin that headed off towards the forest a bit in a northeast direction. These people were livid and scared. I offered them what I was allowed, a full refund, minus cleaning deposit. They were fine with that. After about an hour, they packed up and were speeding out of the area. I decided at that point to head back, take a shower, and come back later in the evening to clean up and get the cabin ready for the next guests. Hopefully, whomever it was gone and would leave the next visitors alone, I thought. Surround sound. I like surround sound when it comes to music and electronics, but when it is some large, smelly, half-ape, half-monster-looking things of the woods making the sound, well, that is something else, something frightening. I returned to the cabin later on in the afternoon, actually about a couple hours before sunset. However, where the cabin sat, it was like dusk all that afternoon as it sat low behind a mountain, and the trees there were rather enormous for the most part, creating sort of a canopy. I started by taking a look around the property again and making sure the hoodlums did not come back and break any windows. Everything looked secure and fine, but the heel prints were still there, and being alone, well, I felt a little uneasy, to tell you the truth. I got to work out on the porch where they left some garbage and swept up as well. After that, I moved inside, where I found out that those people were rather messy, even for being in there less than 24 hours. There was juice spilled in the kitchen and some food still out near the sink below the window. I decided to get that last and start in the back of the cabin and work my way out the front door as I usually do. It was when I was vacuuming that all of a sudden I heard a whack or something hitting the cabin. Now the cabin is an A-frame with 2 rooms upstairs with a small hallway, but I heard it and knew it must have hit pretty hard. I stopped the vacuum cleaner and stood there for a second or so, mumbling, even a little giggling perhaps. I was hearing someone outside. Then I heard it from the front of the cabin. There were more than one person out there. I got rather nervous knowing all of a sudden that my gun was in the car, and I was alone in the cabin with some jerks outside talking to each other and possibly about how to scare me, or worse. I walked to the back of the short hallway and opened the window slowly. And that is when I heard what sounded like mumbling before, but now it was not words. It was, well, like monkey chatter almost. And I could distinctly hear clicks, while whatever it was chattering with its own strange sounds or speech as well. It stood in the doorway. It was not seconds after I heard the chatter that I began to see movement within the trees and bushes just on the other side of the driveway. It took a step out all of a sudden, and I found myself frozen in shock and fear as I was now looking at a female, because of the breasts, Bigfoot. No kidding, a Bigfoot, real and in life. It took my brain a few seconds or so to realize what I was looking at, however. I mean, seriously, this thing was something I never in my life had seen before. It's like trying to picture a color you've never seen. Your mind simply has no record of such a thing, period. It was tall, but no more than 7 feet, I would guess. She was full of thick hair, about an inch or 2 in length, and reddish and brown in color. She looked around, leaning left and right, looking like she was wondering where I was or looking at the other creature on either side of the cabin itself. Her head was sat right on top of her shoulders, it seemed, and when she finally walked off to the east side of the cabin, the walk was weird as one foot landed right in front of the other, and she looked almost hunched or bent as she walked. The only thing I could compare it to was the Patterson and Gimlin film I watched days later after I calmed down. I watched as she walked off out of sight to the east side of the cabin, and that is when I heard something else. There were footsteps coming up the front of the building, like literally on the porch. I quietly tiptoed over to the doorway to one of the bedrooms, just enough to see through the rail along the top of the stairs and down into the front living room and the door. I left it open. A shadow fell over the whole doorway, and when I thought it could not get any darker at that point, a tall, dark figure as black as midnight stood all of a sudden in the doorway. Its hair was the color of midnight, literally, and it had to bend over quite a bit just to look into the cabin. This was a male, you could tell, and it reached its arm inside as it bent down to look in. It had a very heavy brow line, and the eyes seemed dark, but I could tell there were some whites to them. Its arm was massive, probably as wide as both of my legs together in width. It was also really long. They were really, really long, and the fingers were too. Its face was somewhat like a monkey, I guess, but I am still not sure if that is a fitting description, however. Like I said, he had no real reference for them at first. You could hear it breathing through its large and somewhat flat nostrils. Its mouth was basically a long slit, and I could not see any teeth, thank goodness. I can't tell you how scared I was. I really thought this thing was going to come in, see me, and possibly attack me. It was so huge, it could literally tear me apart in a split second. I was literally shaking at this point, and I thought I was going to pass out. All I could think to do was to scream. I know it sounds crazy. Doing just that, screaming and bringing attention to myself, was nuts. But I felt as though it was the best thing I could do at the moment. So I took the metal tube part of the vacuum cleaner that was in my hand and raised it up. I looked downstairs one more time, and by that point the Bigfoot looked as though he might put a foot through the door. I let it go at that point. I threw the metal vacuum cleaner tube at the rail and screamed for my life. I also passed out cold and hit my head so hard on the floor that when I woke up seconds later, it had a small cut on it. I would learn the moment I returned to the cabin. They must have left in a hurry when I made the commotion and noise, as there seemed to be no sign of them as I woke up and got myself together, ran to my car, got in, looked around for a moment, and sped out of there. I had to return the next day, but I was not going alone. One of the owners drove up later that night after I told them what had transpired. She thought I must have fallen down the stairs and really did a number on my head, because I don't think she believed a word I said. I could tell by her facial expressions. Moving on up to the sky. I am not out of the woods today, and I mean that literally. Today I work for a large company doing the same thing, just closer to civilization, where I feel a whole lot safer. The Bigfoot did not completely scare me away from enjoying creation for good, and today I am feeling much better, and with my family in tow, we take long jaunts to the redwood forest from here time to time. My husband knows I am cautious, though, and never drags us too far into the forest. We are always within earshot of a road or a highway, and that is just the way I like it today. Personally, I think they were passing through, as I had been up there for quite some time by that point, and not once until that day had heard or seen anything. But, apparently, they are around, and they do exist. Thanks. Alma.